The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table, cutting into a stack of warm waffles when the phone rang. Uncle Tim was seated beside me, leisurely reading the newspaper. Without lowering it completely, his eyes drifted over the top of the pages toward the ringing phone. A faint smile crossed his face before he simply returned to reading, apparently content to let someone else answer it. Tate, meanwhile, was running late. Something about not being able to find a pair of jeans that made him look good enough had kept him upstairs, whatever that meant. It wasn't unusual for Tate to obsess over little things like that before coming downstairs. I pushed back my chair and stood. Talia was busy arranging several catered breakfast dishes across the dining table, and with Terrence already gone on a business trip to Miami, I figured I could at least answer the phone and make myself useful. So I walked across the room and picked up the receiver. "Hello." Whoever was on the other end of the line didn't answer. Instead, I heard the faint clink of a glass. It was the creepy caller again. At least that's what I assumed. "Hello," I asked, "who is this?" "Nothing." The silence was almost deafening. Then I heard what sounded like someone swallowing a mouthful of liquid. "Hello," I tried again. Across the breakfast table, Uncle Tim lowered his newspaper just enough to peek over the top of it. A crooked smirk spread across his face before he casually lifted the paper again, as if he were trying very hard not to laugh. I frowned. "Very funny," I muttered to the silent receiver before hanging up. Still irritated, I returned to my seat. Just then, Talia walked out of the kitchen carrying a warm coffee cake. "Who was that, honey?" she asked. "Nobody," I replied, reaching for my fork. "Just some creepy person who keeps calling. It's probably one of Tate's lovers." Uncle Tim suddenly choked on his coffee. He coughed into his napkin, his shoulders shaking before he burst into laughter. I stared at him. "What?" Tim only waved a hand, still laughing too hard to answer. A few minutes later, Tate finally came downstairs wearing an expensive pair of Gucci jeans. "I finally found the right pair," he announced, sounding completely satisfied with himself. Only Tate would hold up breakfast over a pair of jeans. A few minutes after that, Uncle Joey wandered into the dining room. His hair was slightly messy, and he looked like he'd only just rolled out of bed. "Hey, Tate," Uncle Tim said casually before taking a sip of his coffee. The future Mrs. Tate Blue called again. A grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. "That creepy caller called while you were upstairs," poor Noah answered it. He looked at me with exaggerated sympathy. "Maybe you'll get lucky instead, Noah. Maybe she'll propose to you. You snooze, you lose, Tate." Tate slowly turned toward Uncle Tim, his expression hardening. "Shut the fuck up." He pulled out his chair and sat down with an irritated sigh. Across the table, Uncle Joey lit a cigarette, clearly entertained. "The future Mrs. Tate Blue," he repeated with a laugh. "What is she, your fiancée, you in love or something?" He chuckled to himself. I didn't laugh. Instead, I quietly looked down at my plate and cut another piece of my waffle, pretending I was more interested in breakfast than the conversation. For some reason, hearing them joke about Tate getting married bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I told myself it was just another one of Tim's ridiculous jokes, but a small knot still formed in my stomach. What if there really was someone? I hated that the thought even crossed my mind. Across the table, Tate shot Joey a glare sharp enough to cut glass. His jaw tightened, and for a moment it looked as though he was deciding whether to answer or simply throw something at both of them. Judging by the amused looks on Tim's and Joey's faces, neither of them had the slightest intention of letting the joke die. The phone rang again. Before anyone could move, Uncle Tim started laughing. "Oh, there she is again," he said, grinning at Tate. "It's your sweetie pie." He counted on his fingers as though searching for the right nickname. "Snookums, honey, sweetheart, I think she's calling her handsome little Tate again." He leaned back in his chair. Terrence had better start writing a check for the wedding. Uncle Joey burst into laughter. "Little Tate's in love," he sang in a teasing voice. "Tate and Stacy sitting in a tree, kissing, first comes love. Then comes marriage, then comes a blue baby in a baby carriage." Joey tapped the table with the palm of his hand, laughing even harder. Tate's face tightened with annoyance. If one of you answers that phone, he warned, glaring at both of them, I'm leaving. That only made Tim and Joey laugh harder. I sat quietly looking from one face to another, completely confused. They all seemed to know something I didn't, and whatever the joke was, I was the only person at the table who wasn't in on it. The phone continued to ring, filling the dining room as Tim and Joey struggled to contain their laughter. Talia shook her head as she watched her brothers-in-law relentlessly tease her son before answering the ringing phone. Hello, she said. Yes, this is his mother. Across the room, Uncle Tim started giggling again. Kiss, 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 he sang. Stop it, Tate muttered, trying to concentrate on his waffles. I can take a message, Talia continued into the receiver. He's eating breakfast right now. She listened for a moment, then reached for a sticky note. All right, did you want to call back? Okay, have a nice day, bye. She hung up the phone, scribbled a few words on the note, and walked toward Tate. Before she could hand it to him, Uncle Joey snatched it from her fingers. Well, he said with a mischievous grin, who's Stacy? He looked over at Tate and nudged him with his elbow. One of your girlfriends, one of the people you sleep with, huh? Joey cleared his throat dramatically and read the note aloud. Stacy called, wants to know when she can hook up with you again. He slapped the table and burst into laughter. Ooh, somebody's going to get laid. Uncle Tim doubled over, laughing right beside him. I didn't say a word. I quietly stared at my plate, pushing a piece of waffle through a puddle of syrup with my fork. I wasn't hungry anymore. Stacy. The name echoed in my head more than I cared to admit. I told myself it didn't matter. Tate could talk to whoever he wanted. It wasn't any of my business. Still, I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Across the table, Tate's face had turned bright red with frustration. You two are unbelievable, he muttered, reaching over to snatch the sticky note from Joey's hand as Tim and Joey continued laughing. After breakfast, Tate wandered over to the answering machine. I watched from the living room. 14 missed calls. All from that morning. He sighed and pressed the play button. One by one, the messages began to play. Hi Tate, it's Dee. You were supposed to call me back. I'd really like to see you again. You know my number. Beep. Delete. Another message. Hi, it's Tiffany. We met at that art gallery. I'd love to get together again sometime. Give me a call if you're interested. No pressure. Beep. Delete. Another. Hi, this is George Ann. I haven't heard from you in a while. If you'd like to get together again, just call me. Beep. Delete. The pattern continued. Different voices. Different ages. Different accents. One after another, Tate listened for only a few seconds before pressing the delete button. He didn't hesitate. Most of the messages disappeared almost as quickly as they played. From the breakfast table, Uncle Joey watched with obvious amusement. He laughed and shook his head. Somebody's popular with the ladies. He pointed toward Tate. Taking after your uncle, huh? Tate didn't even look up. He simply rolled his eyes, deleted another message, and moved on to the next voicemail as Joey continued chuckling to himself. I couldn't stay in the living room. Every voicemail felt like another knot tightening in my stomach. I quietly slipped upstairs, closed my bedroom door, buried my face in my pillow, and let out a muffled scream. I hated how jealous I felt. The messages from women who wanted to see Tate again shouldn't have bothered me. But they did. More than I wanted to admit. About 20 minutes later, my bedroom door opened. Tate peeked inside. You okay? I was already lying in bed. He frowned. Do you have a migraine? He asked. You're in bed and it's only 9:30 in the morning. I nodded. It's a bad migraine. Without another word, he sat beside me on the bed. He gently lifted my head into his lap and began rubbing slow circles against my temples with his fingertips. Something he'd done for me more than once over the years. For a while neither of us spoke. His touch was calming. Then I quietly asked, who was that creepy caller, the one who keeps calling? His hand stopped. The room suddenly felt very still. After a moment, he resumed rubbing my temples, but more slowly. It's not any of your business, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was simply firm. I flinched anyway. Tate sighed. I have a life outside of you, Noah, he said gently, just like you have a life outside of me. He looked down at me. I don't ask questions every time someone calls you. A faint smile crossed his face. Although, to be fair, I don't think I've ever heard a girl call you. I couldn't help letting out the smallest huff of amusement. No offense, he added, it's just my business. He paused before continuing. Uncle Joey and Uncle Tim think it's funny to tease me, that's all. He gave my temple another gentle rub. But it isn't funny to me. His expression softened. So just let it go, okay? Tate noticed. For the rest of the day, I kept my distance from him. I wasn't rude, I still answered when he spoke to me, I just didn't seek him out the way I usually did. If he walked into a room, I'd find something else to do. If he wanted to watch television together, I'd tell him I was reading. I knew he could feel it. The truth was, it wasn't just the phone calls that bothered me. It was what he'd said. It's not any of your business. The word stayed with me all day. There had only been one other time Tate had ever said something like that to me, when I'd asked him about Wayne. I'd never brought Wayne up again after that. What confused me was that Tate had always insisted there weren't supposed to be secrets between us. More than once he'd told me that if something was his business, then it was my business too. We'd always shared everything. Except apparently when we didn't. He couldn't have it both ways. He couldn't tell me he was an open book and then suddenly decide certain parts of his life were off limits. So I pulled away. I didn't argue with him. I didn't complain. I just stopped reaching for him. Tate definitely noticed the distance growing between us, even if neither of us acknowledged it. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of Tate's phone ringing. Still half asleep, I nudged him. Tate, your phone. He only mumbled something into his pillow and rolled over. Definitely not Noah. With a sigh, I reached across him and answered it. Hello. A faint clink echoed through the receiver. My stomach sank. The creepy caller. What do you want? I snapped. Answer me. Silence. Who are you? Nothing. Leave Tate alone. I waited. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of running water, as if someone had turned on a shower somewhere in the background. What is this? I muttered. Some kind of bizarre phone sex prank. Still no reply. Tate doesn't want to talk to you, I said. He's asleep. He's with me in bed. For several long minutes, I heard nothing except distant sounds on the other end of the line. The water eventually stopped. A few moments later came a series of strange metallic noises. Clank. Then another. It sounded as though someone was opening or closing something made of metal, followed by another heavy click that I couldn't identify. I frowned. What in the world was I listening to? Another metallic snap echoed through the receiver. Then, a loud bang. I yelped and dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp crack. My heart pounded. For a split second, my mind raced to the worst possible conclusion. Was that a gunshot? I couldn't tell. It could have been almost anything over a telephone line, a slammed door, something heavy falling, or another loud noise distorted by the connection. But whatever it was, it had frightened me enough that I just stood there, staring at the phone on the floor, unsure of what I'd actually heard. At breakfast the next morning, Uncle Tim and Uncle Joey were bent over the newspaper, working on the crossword puzzle together while everyone else ate. I looked over at Tate. That creepy caller called again while you were asleep a few hours ago. Tim's pencil froze in midair. He slowly looked over the top of the newspaper at his nephew. You don't have an Alex Forrest in your bed, do you? He asked dryly. Tate's jaw clenched. I continued before he could answer. They never said anything. I heard what sounded like someone taking a shower, then there were these weird metallic noises. A second later there was this really loud bang right next to the phone. It scared me so much I dropped the receiver. I looked at Tate. I think you have a stalker. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Tate laughed. Don't be melodramatic. He took another bite of his breakfast as though the whole thing were ridiculous. It's probably just some weird person going through a delusional phase. I wasn't convinced. You don't think it's strange that they keep calling and never say anything? Tate shrugged. I've had stranger things happen. Uncle Tim exchanged a quick glance with Uncle Joey before quietly returning to the crossword puzzle. Neither of them looked nearly as amused as they had the day before. Uncle Joey burst out laughing. "I've got it," he said, pointing at Tate. Tate met some exotic beauty, swept her off her feet, and then stopped returning her calls. He leaned back in his chair with a grin. Now she's hopelessly in love, and she just can't let him go. Tim chuckled under his breath. Joey wasn't finished. "What do you think she's doing right now?" he asked dramatically. "Sitting alone in some hotel room, turning the lights on and off like a complete nut." He wiggled his fingers theatrically. "Maybe she's got your picture taped to the wall. Maybe she's writing your name in blood everywhere and planning your morbid wedding." Tate rolled his eyes. "You've been watching too many horror movies." Joey laughed even harder. "I'm telling you, kid, you've got yourself one devoted admirer." Tate groaned. "I wish everyone would stop talking about this and just eat breakfast." "I was scared," I admitted quietly. "Whoever called, I heard what sounded like a gun being loaded, and then there was a loud bang. It scared me." My voice caught, and before I knew it, tears had started rolling down my cheeks. Uncle Joey sighed and rolled his eyes. "Noah, it's probably just some prank," he said. "People do strange things sometimes, especially when they get a little too attached to a stud's body." He pointed his fork toward Tate. "Believe me, your buddy attracts attention." Joey shook his head with a laugh. "I had one woman who became so obsessed she broke into my penthouse while I was away. She used my shower, sprayed on my cologne, drank my whiskey, and made herself completely at home." Tim looked up from the crossword. "No kidding." "No kidding," Joey replied. "I ended up having her arrested. Just because you meet someone once doesn't mean they're invited into your life forever. Some people have absolutely no boundaries." He shook his head in disbelief. Tate suddenly choked on his orange juice. He coughed into his napkin, then, despite himself, burst into hysterical laughter. Joey looked at him. "What?" Tate tried to answer but couldn't stop laughing long enough to get the words out. Tate kept laughing. He laughed so hard he had to set his glass down, pointing at Uncle Joey as tears formed in the corners of his eyes. Noah didn't know what to do. I just stared down at my waffles, quietly sniffling while everyone else seemed to find the conversation amusing. Eventually Tate caught his breath. "Joey," he said between lingering chuckles, "please don't say things you don't mean." "I do mean it," Joey replied with a shrug. "Some people just don't understand boundaries." He took another sip of his coffee. "I've had women follow me home just because I bought them a drink. Next thing you know, they act like they're entitled to a drawer in my apartment." Uncle Tim laughed. "I've never had that problem." He smirked at Joey. "Then again, I'm not exactly a ladies' man." Joey grinned. "No, you definitely aren't." The two brothers laughed while Tate shook his head, still smiling to himself. I remained quiet, absent-mindedly pushing my waffles around my plate, unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me since the mysterious phone calls began. "Do you remember Emily?" Uncle Joey asked Tate. The moment I heard her name, I flinched. "Emily." Just hearing it brought back memories I'd spent a long time trying not to think about. She was one of the reasons Tate and I hadn't been as close for a while. Joey continued, completely unaware of what was going through my mind. "At least Emily didn't get overly attached. When you told her it wasn't going anywhere, she accepted it and moved on." He pointed his coffee mug toward Tate. "You've got to be selective about who you bring home." He shook his head. "Better yet, don't bring anyone home, ever." Tate raised an eyebrow. "Oh." "I'm serious," Joey said. "The minute someone knows where you live, you've created a whole new set of problems. I've had to have some very awkward conversations with my doorman over the years." Uncle Tim smirked. "How many?" Joey laughed. "I've lost count." He leaned back in his chair. "My doorman has turned away more women than I could ever remember. Some of them tried to follow me into the building. A wealthy single guy can't even sit down for a drink without somebody wandering over asking if he's available." Tim chuckled. "You're unbelievable." "I wish I were exaggerating," Joey replied with a grin. Tate laughed again, shaking his head at his uncle's storytelling. I stayed silent. My appetite had disappeared. I picked at my breakfast without really eating it, wishing Joey had never brought up Emily at all. No, Tate said, his voice softening, just stop answering the phone. He looked directly at me. I get a lot of strange calls. Honestly, that isn't even the creepiest one I've ever received. Everyone at the table looked at him. I've had complete strangers call me asking for all kinds of things, and I have no idea who they are. He shrugged. One time I went to a party, fell asleep on a couch for a little while, and woke up because someone I'd never met was trying to get way too close to me. I punched him, Tate said matter-of-factly, then I left. He reached over and gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. People don't always respect boundaries. His expression softened as he looked at me. Except you. For the first time that morning, I looked up from my plate. Uncle Joey immediately broke into a grin. Oh wait. He nudged Uncle Tim with his elbow. Do you two need the dining room to yourselves? Tim and I can leave if you boys need a private moment. Will you shut up? Tate groaned, glaring at his uncle. Joey and Tim burst into laughter. Despite myself, the corner of my mouth twitched into the smallest smile. Could you ask them not to call the house? I asked quietly. That last call really scared me, Tate. For a moment he didn't answer. Then his expression hardened. Just leave it. His voice was sharper than before. It's not important. He drove his fork into his waffle with more force than necessary. Mind your own business. The words hit me like a slap. I instinctively shrank back. Uncle Joey looked between us and let out a low whistle. Oh, he said, I'm smelling a divorce. Tim snorted into his coffee. Joey continued, unable to resist. Is 19 years of domestic bliss and bed-sharing finally coming to an end? Nobody laughed. Tate's patience snapped. He slammed his fork onto his plate. Why doesn't everyone at this table go fuck themselves and mind their own business? The room fell silent. His eyes landed on me. I flinched without meaning to. For just a second, the anger on his face faded, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. But he didn't say anything. Instead, he pushed back his chair so abruptly it scraped across the floor, stood, and stormed out of the dining room. A moment later, the entire house echoed with the sound of his bedroom door slamming upstairs. No one spoke. Even Uncle Joey had lost his smile. That night when Tate climbed into bed beside me, he slipped beneath the covers like he always did. Instinctively, I shifted a few inches farther away. It wasn't much. Just enough for him to notice. And judging by the way he became perfectly still behind me, he noticed immediately. His hand shifted slightly against my back, not tightening, just adjusting, refining the hold like he was making sure there were no gaps left open, like he trusted his instincts more than sleep. Then, quieter than before, almost lost in the space between breath and silence, I felt him press his forehead briefly against my shoulder. A grounding gesture, or a final check-in with reality before he let himself drift. My chest rose and fell carefully beneath him, each breath controlled, measured. I didn't move, didn't break the illusion, but my mind stayed wide awake, tracking everything. The warmth, the weight, the stillness, the fact that he was sleeping like this at all. People don't sleep like this unless they expect something, unless they're ready for it, unless they're afraid it might come anyway, and even then he stayed on top of me, wrapped around me like a shield he refused to lower. My fingers curled slightly against his side, barely there, before going still again. If that caller's warning was meant to make me leave, it wasn't working the way they intended. Because whatever they thought they were doing, whatever message they were trying to send, Tate had already answered it. Tate came to bed much later than he usually did. That alone felt strange. Normally, no matter how late he stayed up, he would slip into bed not long after I did. Tonight, though, I had been lying awake for what felt like hours before I finally heard his footsteps in the hallway. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. The bedroom door opened quietly. Tate walked over to his dresser instead of coming straight to bed. In the darkness, I could barely make out his silhouette as he opened one of the drawers and took something out. I couldn't tell what it was. A moment later, he set something heavy on his bedside table. Clank! The metallic sound cut through the silence. My eyes flew open. It was subtle but unmistakable. I'd heard a sound like that before. It reminded me of the strange metallic noises I'd heard over the telephone from the mysterious caller. My heart began to beat a little faster. What was that? I couldn't see well enough to tell. Tate didn't say a word. After a few more quiet moments, I heard him climb into bed beside me. I stared into the darkness, unable to shake the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe I was beginning to hear connections that weren't really there. Either way, sleep suddenly felt very far away. Tate had fallen asleep almost instantly. As usual, he'd ended up half on top of me, one arm draped across my chest as though nothing had happened between us that day. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything: the strange phone calls, the silence on the other end, the metallic noises, the loud bang. Then there was whatever Tate had taken from his dresser before climbing into bed. What had he been doing? Outside, a car drove slowly down the street. Its headlights swept across the bedroom, sending pale bands of light through the window and briefly illuminating the room. For the first time, I glanced toward Tate's bedside table. My breath caught. Resting beside his pillow was a loaded cocked handgun. It wasn't tucked away in a drawer or locked out of sight. It was sitting within easy reach. A chill ran through me. My eyes darted from the gun to Tate's sleeping face. He looked completely peaceful. The realization settled over me with unnerving weight. Maybe he hadn't brushed off the mysterious caller as casually as he'd claimed. Maybe he'd laughed at breakfast because he hadn't wanted anyone to know he was taking it seriously. I lay awake for what felt like hours, listening to Tate's steady breathing beside me, unable to stop staring into the darkness and wondering what had changed. With silence, with a gun under the nightstand, and with his body between me and everything else in the world. The next morning came in softly as if nothing had happened in the night. Sunlight filtered through the edges of the living room, weak and pale, making everything feel almost normal again if I didn't think too hard about it. The gun on Tate's nightstand was gone, replaced by a tissue box instead. I was only half awake when I felt Tate shift beside me, then I felt it. Kisses. Light, repetitive, scattered against my temple like he couldn't decide where to stop. I'm sorry, he said immediately. Then again. I'm sorry. Again. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. His voice was low but urgent, like he needed to get it all out before I was fully awake enough to interrupt him. I blinked slowly, trying to process the sudden shift. Tate kept going anyway, holding me a little closer as if proximity could fix what he was saying. I never want you to mind your own business, he said quickly. If I wanted that, I wouldn't have brought you home all those years ago. Another kiss to my temple. You can butt into my business any time you want, he added, then paused like he was choosing his words carefully. Preferably when I'm not on the toilet, but still. That last part broke something in the tension. A laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. It came out small, tired, real. Come on, I said, finally opening my eyes more fully. Let's go downstairs and get some breakfast. Tate went quiet for a second. Then he just held me there a little longer, like he was making sure the apology had actually landed, like he was checking if I was still there with him. And I realized he was still trying to fix something he didn't know how to explain, trying to make the night before feel smaller than it had been, and I let him for now. I accepted Tate's apology, but the question still sat heavily in my chest. I turned slightly toward him, watching the way he moved in the low light of the room, the way he tried to smooth everything back into normal as if nothing had happened at all. Why does the prankster keep calling you? I asked quietly. Why is the caller ID definitely not Noah? It doesn't make sense. For a second, everything in Tate tightened. His shoulders stiffened almost immediately, like the question had landed somewhere sensitive. The calm he'd been trying to hold slipped just slightly at the edges. He shook his head once, like that was supposed to end it there. They won't call again, he added more firmly, controlling his voice now. I took care of it. There was something final in the way he said it, not loud, not emotional, just closed, like the conversation had reached a wall and wasn't allowed to go any further. I studied him for a moment longer, but he was already shifting the moment away, already trying to rebuild the normal between us. Then he leaned in and pressed a quick kiss to my cheek, soft and familiar, like he was anchoring me back into something safe on purpose. "Come on," he said, his tone lighter now as he swung the mood forward. "Let's get breakfast." He got out of bed first, waiting for me like the night hadn't just tilted slightly off balance. The next morning, as we were leaving the bedroom, something caught my eye. There was a new lock on the door. I stopped in the hallway and stared at it. It definitely hadn't been there a day or two ago. Tate reached into his pocket, pulled out a small key, and quietly unlocked it before opening the door. I looked at him. "When did that get there?" "Yesterday," he replied simply. He slipped the key back into his pocket as though it were no big deal. I didn't ask any more questions. After everything that had happened over the past couple of days, the mysterious phone calls, the late-night metallic noises, and the handgun on his bedside table, the new lock only deepened the uneasy feeling growing inside me. Without another word, Tate opened the door and together we headed downstairs for breakfast. And I followed him downstairs anyway. But even as the house filled with morning light and the smell of breakfast, the way he said "absolutely not" kept echoing in my head like it meant more than just a correction. I remembered the green scarf I had seen in Tate's closet on my 18th birthday. It kept coming back to me for some reason, like my mind was trying to anchor itself to something normal while everything else felt increasingly not normal at all. Tate had already gone downstairs ahead of me, his voice fading into the house as he called for something about breakfast like the night before, and the calls and everything else had already been filed away in his head. I lingered upstairs a moment longer, put on fresh socks slowly, tried to breathe like it was just another morning, then I turned toward the door. That's when Tate's mobile started ringing again. It was still on the nightstand, left behind. The sound felt too sharp in the morning quiet. My stomach tightened instantly. I stared at it for a second before picking it up. Caller ID lit up the screen. Definitely not Noe. Same number, same presence, the prank caller. I hesitated, then answered. The line opened into the same familiar wrongness. Ice clinking, glass shifting, water running in the background, steady and distant like a shower in another room I could never locate. My grip tightened slightly. "Hello," I said anyway. Nothing responded. Just the layered sounds like someone's life was happening in fragments through the phone. I stood there for about 30 seconds listening, trying to make sense of it the way I always did. Trying to convince myself it was just some strange interference, some prank, something harmless that just sounded wrong. But it didn't feel harmless. I heard a condom wrapper tear. It spooked me. I hung up. I waited until Tate's footsteps faded down the stairs before I moved. The house felt quieter in that way that only happens when someone specific is no longer nearby, like the air itself relaxes. 3 doors down from Tate's bedroom, across from the spare room, was Joey's guest room. I stopped at Joey's room and knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Joey looked at me like he already knew I wasn't just passing by. "What are you up to? It's 9 in the morning." I shifted slightly. "Can I come in?" His eyes narrowed a little, amused. "Are you sure Tate won't get jealous?" I nodded once. "No, he's downstairs for breakfast." That made him step aside. Bold answer, all right. I walked in and closed the door behind me. The guest room was the same as always, too neat, too quiet, a few used whiskey glasses like nobody actually lived in it. Joey always said it was because of dust in the main house, some allergy thing, but the room looked more like someone who didn't stay anywhere long enough to settle. I glanced around the guest room. For a moment, it felt like stepping back into the past. Tate and I had slept in this room a handful of times when we were younger, usually during thunderstorms when the lightning was too bright and the cracks of thunder were too loud. Sometimes it was because Tate had a nightmare. Other times he simply didn't want to be alone. When we were children, Tate had a habit of sleepwalking. More than once he had wandered into this room without even realizing it, looking for someone familiar and comforting. Being here made him feel safe. And honestly, it made me feel safe too. Uncle Joey had always been that kind of presence in our lives. When things felt overwhelming or uncertain, he had a way of making everything seem less frightening. He could turn almost anything into a joke, but underneath all of that was the fact that he was someone we trusted. Someone who made the world feel a little less scary. Standing there now, surrounded by old memories, I couldn't help thinking about how much had changed. This room had once been a place where Tate and I came when we needed comfort. Now I wasn't sure if I was looking for comfort or trying to understand what was happening around us. I sat on the edge of the bed, it barely shifted under me. "You don't sleep here," I said. Joey sat down in the chair beside the bed, relaxed, elbows resting on his knees. "I sleep, just not here much. This room is just where I end up when Tulua insists I stay over." I murmured, unconvinced. Then my voice lowered. "Those phone calls, the menacing ones, Tate keeps getting them." Joey's expression changed immediately, less playful now, still. I nodded. "He says they're nothing," I added, "but they don't sound like nothing." Joey leaned back slightly in his chair. "And you believe him?" "I don't know," I admitted, "I just don't like it." There was a pause. Then I looked at him. I hesitated before speaking. "Tate loaded a gun and kept it on his nightstand." Joey's expression changed immediately. "He did." I nodded. "He thinks the person calling might come into our room." The words sounded strange as soon as I said them out loud. Joey set his coffee down. "Are you sure?" "I saw it," I whispered. "And after everything that's happened, the calls, the noises, the lock on the door, I think he's actually scared." For a moment, Joey didn't make a joke. That alone told me he was taking it seriously. He rubbed his chin, thinking. "Tate has always acted as if nothing bothers him," he finally said, "but when he does get scared, he usually hides it." I looked down at the floor. "He won't talk to me about it." Joey sighed. "That's Tate." He gave me a sympathetic look. "He thinks protecting people means keeping them away from the problem." I swallowed. "But I'm not just some person he's protecting." Joey's expression softened. "No, you're not." He paused. "You're Noah. Would you keep an eye on Tate, just in case, if something happens, I mean anything weird, anything off?" Joey studied me for a moment, quieter now. "You really care about that kid, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. Joey gave a small exhale through his nose, like he already understood. "All right," he said finally, "I'll keep an eye on him if anything looks wrong. I'll go straight to his father, no waiting around." Relief loosened something in my chest. "And I won't let anything happen to either of you," he added, more serious now. Before I could respond, Joey stood and stepped closer. He gently tugged me up from the bed. "Hey," I started, surprised. But he pulled me into a brief hug, steady, protective, nothing rushed about it, just firm enough to feel like reassurance rather than comfort. "You're safe as long as I'm here," he said quietly. I nodded slightly against his shoulder. "Okay." Then the door slammed open. "Tate." Joey's voice hit the room like a warning. Joey let go immediately, stepping back just as Tate appeared in the doorway, eyes sharp, fixed, already taking in everything at once. "There you are," Tate said. His gaze flicked from me to Joey, then back again, slower this time. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, voice controlled but tight underneath. Joey didn't move. "Morning to you too." Tate ignored him completely and stepped inside. "You went looking for him again," Tate said, stopping in front of me. "Didn't I tell you not to wander the house?" "I wasn't wandering," I said quickly. "I knocked," I asked. Tate's jaw flexed. "That's the same thing," he muttered. Joey let out a small sigh. "It isn't actually." Tate turned his head slightly toward him. "Don't start." Joey raised both hands a little, not starting, just observing. Tate scoffed and looked back at me. "What did you tell him this time?" he asked. "That I'm worried about the calls," I said honestly. That made something flicker in Tate's expression, annoyance maybe, but underneath it's something more guarded. He let out a short breath. "Of course you did." "I didn't say anything wrong," I added. Tate stepped closer, not aggressive, just enough to fill the space between us. "You don't have to bring Joey into everything," he said more quietly. Joey tilted his head. "Noah didn't bring me into anything," he asked. Tate shot him a look. "I wasn't talking to you." Joey nodded once. "Fair enough." Silence stretched for a moment, then Tate looked back at me. His voice dropped slightly. "You really think something's going on?" "I think the calls aren't normal," I said, "that's all." That answer didn't satisfy him. It never fully did. Tate exhaled and stepped back a half step, running a hand through his hair. "Fine," he said, "but you don't go doing this alone." I wasn't alone, I said, glancing at Joey. Tate followed my gaze, his eyes narrowed slightly. Yeah, he said under his breath, I noticed. Joey sighed again. You're really going to keep doing that? Doing what? Tate snapped. Acting like I'm a problem every time I exist in the same room as him. I can help, Joey said, touching Tate's shoulder. There's nothing you can do, Tate snapped toward Joey. The room went quiet. Tate leaned back in his chair, his frustration obvious. The person who keeps calling me is disturbed, he said. They're probably more of a danger to themselves than anyone else. Joey watched him carefully. Tate sighed and rubbed his forehead. But if you happen to see some creepy stranger hanging outside the house, don't just ignore it, he added. Make sure they leave. I don't want anyone coming near this family. Joey raised an eyebrow. So that's what we're calling it now, a family security meeting. Tate rolled his eyes. Just take it seriously, Joey. For once, Joey didn't make a joke. He nodded slowly. I am. That answer seemed to surprise Tate. Because underneath all the sarcasm and teasing, Joey understood exactly what Tate was trying to say. He was scared. He just didn't want anyone to know. Tate didn't answer right away. Tate's eyes flicked to me again, softer for a split second, then tightened again when Joey shifted in his chair slightly closer to my side of the table. That was all it took. Tate leaned back, folding his arms. You know what, he said, I think it's interesting how every time I turn around, you're suddenly everyone's favorite person to check in on. Joey raised an eyebrow. Are you jealous? The word landed cleanly in the space between us. Tate didn't answer immediately. That silence was an answer on its own. I'm not jealous, he said finally, colder now. I just don't like people getting too comfortable around Noah. Comfortable, Joey repeated, amused. He sat on my bed, Tate, not my lap. Relax. My face heated a little anyway, and I shifted in my seat. Tate noticed that too. Downstairs, Joey's hand moved under the table and lightly touched my wrist again, not pulling this time, just holding it there like an anchor. I don't like it, Tate said, quieter now, almost like he was admitting something he didn't want anyone else to hear. That's all. Joey studied him for a long moment, then exhaled through his nose. You're not losing him, Joey said simply. Nobody's taking anyone, but you also don't get to decide who he talks to in this house. Tate's grip tightened just slightly. I'm not trying to decide, he said. Then, after a beat sharper again, I'm trying to make sure nobody else decides for me. In case you've forgotten, Tate said, his voice sharp as he looked at Uncle Joey, I'm your nephew, not Noah. The words hit harder than he probably intended. I flinched. Joey's expression changed, the humor disappearing from his face. You're supposed to be showing your uncle's comfort and affection toward me, Tate continued, not him. He gestured toward me, his frustration spilling out. You replace me with him. Tate, Joey started. No, don't lie to me and pretend that's not what happened. The room became painfully quiet. You haven't written to me in months, Tate said. We sit at the same table every day and you still couldn't take 5 minutes to write something to me. His voice cracked slightly, though his anger was still covering it. But somehow you always have time for him. He looked at me for a moment, then back at Joey. A boy who isn't even your blood relation. I didn't know where to look. I wanted to disappear. Because this wasn't about the phone calls anymore. It wasn't about the strange person contacting Tate. It was about something much older. Something Tate had been carrying quietly. I know what's happening, Tate said. I'm being replaced, I'm being pushed out. Joey stared at him, hurt written across his face. For once he didn't have a joke. He didn't have a sarcastic comment. He just looked like someone who had finally heard the pain underneath Tate's anger. Remember when I was 13, Tate said, looking at Joey. Remember when I took your photograph off my wall. Joey went quiet. That painting of you, the one everyone loved. Tate's voice grew sharper. Why the hell would I want a painting of you hanging there when you replaced me with someone else? My stomach tightened. I knew he was talking about me. I brought Noah home from a trailer park and suddenly he became the person you spent your time with, your attention, your affection. You gave him the things you used to give me. Joey looked hurt. Tate. No. Tate shook his head. That's why I took the painting down. The room felt heavy. The day before my 15th birthday, I replaced it with that commission painting of Noah. Do you know why? He pointed toward me. Because that's what you did to me. I froze. You replaced me, so I returned the favor. His voice was cold, but underneath it was something much more painful. And you know what? Noah is more loyal to me, he's more attentive, he actually cares about what happens to me. I looked down, uncomfortable with hearing myself used as a weapon in an argument that started long before I was involved. So every time you ask me to go get ice cream or take a long drive like we used to, just remember something. Tate stared at Joey. It doesn't erase everything. Joey didn't respond. It doesn't magically fix the fact that I felt pushed aside. Tate stepped back. So don't expect me to pretend everything is fine. Don't expect me to act like we're the same as we used to be. The silence that followed was painful. Because beneath Tate's anger was something much simpler. He missed his uncle. And he was hurt that he thought he'd lost him. So you two can do whatever you want, Tate said bitterly. You can stay up here, bond, laugh, and do whatever it is you used to do with me. He looked away. I'm going downstairs to eat waffles and maybe talk to Tim. He's the only uncle I have left who hasn't thrown me aside and replaced me with someone who isn't even family. The words hung in the air. Have a good morning. Tate turned toward the door. Just anywhere that I'm not. Then he slammed Joey's bedroom door and walked downstairs. For a moment, neither of us moved. I looked at Joey. His face was almost impossible to read. He looked like someone who had just been caught standing next to the cookie jar with crumbs on his shirt. I could practically feel the jealousy coming off Tate. What surprised me most wasn't that Tate was angry. It was that, after all these years, he had never truly resented me for it. He could have blamed me. He could have decided that I was the reason Joey's attention changed. But he never did. Somehow, even while he was hurting, Tate still separated the person he loved from the person he was angry with. And maybe that was the part that hurt the most. Downstairs, the air between Joey and Tate went still. Tate had just turned slightly away from the table when Joey moved again. It was small, almost absent-minded. Joey reached across just enough to lightly adjust the edge of my sleeve where it had folded awkwardly at my wrist, smoothing it down like someone fixing a detail without thinking about it. There, Joey said simply, that'll bother you less now. I glanced down. Oh, thanks. It really wasn't anything, just a quick, practical motion, but the silence that followed felt heavier anyway. Tate stopped mid-turn. Slowly, he looked back. Joey had already pulled his hand away and gone back to his coffee as nothing happened. Tate's voice came out low. You really like doing that, don't you? Joey didn't look up. Doing what? Tate gestured slightly toward me. That. Joey finally met his eyes, fixing a sleeve. A pause. Tate exhaled sharply through his nose. It's not about the sleeve. I shifted in my chair. Tate, it wasn't anything, he just. I know what I saw, Tate cut in, but his voice wasn't loud. It was controlled, tight at the edges. Joey set his cup down again, more slowly this time. I'm not trying to irritate you, he said evenly. Tate let out a short laugh. Yeah, that's the problem, you don't have to try. That made the air tighten again. Joey studied him for a moment. Then said calmly, you're reacting like I crossed a line that isn't there. Tate stepped back toward the table slightly, shoulders tense. There are a lot of lines in this house, Joey said. You just keep finding ways to stand right next to them, Tate spat. A beat of silence. I looked between them, feeling the tension rise again. Joey didn't argue immediately. Joey just leaned back in his chair and said, quieter, then tell me where you want the line to be. I don't know, old man. And that question, simple as it sounded, made Tate go still. Then Joey spoke, calm but firm. Enough, Tate, eat your food. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight like a line being drawn without drama. Tate blinked once. His hand paused midair near his fork. For a second it looked like he might argue. His eyes lifted briefly, meeting Joey's. Something passed between them there, not hostility anymore, but a quiet standoff. Tate is holding onto tension. Joey refuses to feed it. Finally, Tate exhaled through his nose. I looked between the two of them, caught in the middle of something that felt bigger than a breakfast table. Tate, I said carefully, nothing happened up there, I was just talking to him. His eyes shifted back to me, and for a moment the edge in him softened again. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I know." But he didn't let go of my wrist. Tate raised an eyebrow across the table, clearly trying to hide a smirk. "Tate, what in the world are you doing with your food?" Uncle Joey asked, leaning in like the plate might suddenly argue back. Tate sat at the breakfast table in silence. He picked up his little bottle of lemon sauce and started pouring it over his food, especially his waffles. It was something he had always done, adding so much lemon sauce that everyone else at the table would make a face. Normally, Joey would have made some sarcastic comment about it. Normally, Tate would have laughed. But this time he just stared down at his plate and kept pouring, his expression unreadable. Uncle Tim glanced over from his newspaper. "You planning on eating those waffles or drowning them?" Tate didn't look up. "Both." Tim raised an eyebrow but didn't push. For once, even the teasing had disappeared. The anger from upstairs was still hanging over the house, and everyone could feel it. Tate didn't even look up properly. He just shrugged, casual as anything, stabbing a piece of roasted turkey that had way too much lemon juice on it. "Experimenting," Tate said, "culinary innovation." Joey blinked at him, "Lemon on grapefruit." "Absolutely," Tate replied like it was obvious, "brings out the flavor." I sat beside him, watching the whole thing unfold, trying not to laugh because it was so ridiculous it almost worked. Almost. Then I noticed the cheesecake, or what he had done to it. Ketchup, a thick red layer spread over the slice as it belonged there. I stared at it for a second too long. "Tate," I whispered under my breath, nudging his side seriously. He finally glanced at me, like I was the one being strange. "What? It's delicious," he said, and took another bite like he was proving a point. Uncle Joey leaned in slightly, trying not to laugh but failing. "And the ketchup on cheesecake?" he asked slowly. Tate didn't hesitate. "Trust me," he said, grinning now, "it's an acquired taste, only the adventurous understand." I shook my head, covering my mouth as I laughed quietly. "You're ridiculous," I said. "And you love it," he shot back immediately, nudging my side like it was the most natural thing in the world. I rolled my eyes but I didn't move away. Around the table people were staring, some whispering, some are just confused, but Tate didn't seem to care at all, and somehow sitting there next to him with the noise of family and plates and conversation around us, it almost felt normal, almost like none of the other nights existed at all. Uncle Joey kissed me goodbye before heading to Lax, ruffling my hair like he always did. "Happy birthday, kiddo," Joey said with that crooked smile of his. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." I gave a small laugh, even though I wasn't fully in the moment anymore. "No promises," Tate replied for me, and I watched Joey disappear down the driveway. When the last car pulled away, the house changed. It didn't just get quieter, it felt emptied out in a way I could feel in my chest. Tate seemed happier on the drive home because Joey wasn't around to adjust my sleeves. I tried to let Tate reset while Talia drove us home in her Mercedes. Tate was happy that Joey was gone. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, Noah thought, but I'd always had the feeling that Tate was jealous of Joey's paternal closeness to me. Joey had become the closest thing I'd ever had to an uncle, and I sometimes wondered if Tate felt threatened by that. Maybe he believed Joey wasn't prioritizing him, the blood nephew, as much as he should have. I did everything I could to not interfere with their relationship. I never tried to monopolize Joey's time, but Joey was naturally attentive to me. He treated me with the same kindness and affection he showed Tate, even though we weren't related by blood. Whenever I tried to spend time alone with Joey, Tate somehow appeared. He would insert himself into our conversations or find a reason to tag along. It always felt as though he was competing with me for Joey's attention, determined to remain the most important person in his uncle's life. I'd seen that side of Tate before. He was the same way with Tim. Tate needed to be number one. Deep down, he seemed terrified of being abandoned, replaced, or discovering that someone he loved had found another person to fill his place. That was exactly why I never told Tate that I wrote letters to Uncle Joey several times a month since Tate's uncle graduated from college in Paris in 1980 when I was 12. Ever since then, for the next decade, I would write Joey, talking about high school girls attending Brown and all the adventures during my younger years. If Tate had found out, he probably would have had a complete jealous meltdown. he wouldn't have seen it as harmless correspondence. In his mind, it would have been another sign that someone he loved was choosing me over him. After Tate's 18th birthday, the noise of the day, voices, laughter, plates clinking, conversations overlapping, was gone all at once, leaving behind a kind of soft, ringing silence. I stayed where I was for a second, unsure what to do with it. Then I noticed Tate across the room. He looked different now that everyone was gone, less performative, less playing host, more himself again. He glanced around like he was checking that everything had actually ended, like he needed confirmation that the day was fully complete. I ended up curled on the couch, half under a blanket, without really remembering moving there. My body felt heavy in that post-social exhaustion way, like I'd used up more energy than I realized. Tate came over quietly, sat down beside me. For a while, neither of us said anything. I could feel my eyes getting heavier just being near him, the noise of everything finally fatting out of my system. Then I felt him lean in. His fingers gently brushed my hair back from my forehead. "You know," he whispered, "being an adult is kind of amazing." I blinked slowly at him, still half caught between sleep and awareness. His face was close enough that I could see the calm in it now, as the earlier chaos had already been filed away somewhere he didn't need to revisit. I tried to respond, but it came out as something barely coherent, a small sound, not words. My eyes fluttered open a little more anyway, just enough to look at him properly. Tate was watching me, not in a way that felt intense, just steady, like I was something familiar he didn't need to question. My body shifted slightly under the blanket without me meaning to, instinctively getting closer to warmth, to comfort, to him, and I let my eyes fall half-closed again, because for the first time that day everything actually felt quiet, and I didn't have to think about anything else. A few days later, things finally started to settle into something normal again, or at least what passed for normal in our lives. The house had gone back to its usual rhythm: quiet mornings, lazy afternoons, the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. The decorations were gone. The leftover cake was gone. Even the last traces of the chaos had been packed away, as it belonged to another version of the week. I was at the kitchen table when the mail came. Nothing special at first. Just bills, flyers, the usual boring stack of things adults pretend to care about. Then I saw it. A postcard. It stood out immediately, not because it was loud, but because it was different from everything else. Thicker paper, slightly worn edges, like it had traveled a long way before ending up here. Tate noticed it too. He didn't say anything at first, just picked it up, flipped it over, and stared at it for a second too long. I watched his face carefully. There was a shift there, small but real, not confusion, not a surprise either, something closer to recognition. "Who is it from?" I asked quietly. Tate didn't answer right away. His thumb ran along the edge of the postcard once, slow and absent, like he was grounding himself in it. Then he finally spoke. "Linus, one of my godfathers," he said. Just that, no explanation, no extra tone, but the way he said it made it feel like a name that carried more weight than it should have. I nodded slowly, trying not to read too much into his expression, even though I already was. "What does it say?" I asked. Tate looked at it again. Then, after a pause, he folded it slightly in his hand, not enough to damage it, just enough to hide part of it. "Nothing important," he said. Too quickly, too smoothly, and just like that he set it down on the counter like it was finished with, like it didn't matter anymore. But I noticed he didn't throw it away, and I noticed he didn't let me read it either. And even though his birthday was already over and the house had gone quiet again, something about the way he looked at that postcard made it feel like the story wasn't actually done yet, just paused. I knew I shouldn't. But after Tate left the room, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the postcard and read it. The handwriting was familiar. "Hey buddy, it's Linus. I'm in Amsterdam. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to your birthday. We were trapped because of a snowstorm. I had plans with Talia for her to pick me up at the airport, but my flight and 3 flights after it were canceled. There was nothing I could do. I waited years to celebrate your 18th birthday with you in person, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. I'll try to make it out in a few weeks and we can celebrate late. I'm so happy for you. I hope your birthday was amazing. I'm bringing a few gifts, so I'll be there on April 3rd. Happy birthday, birthday boy. Love, Linus." I stared at the postcard for a long moment. Suddenly, the anger Tate had been carrying made a little more sense. It wasn't just about one person. It wasn't just about Joey not making it either. It was about every moment Tate felt like someone important chose someone else over him. And somehow, even though I hadn't meant to become part of that story, I was standing right in the middle of it. The silence afterward felt heavier than the call itself. I exhaled slowly, telling myself what Tate had told me before. Sometimes weird people follow you when you're wealthy. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's just noise. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I set the phone down carefully, my hand lingering for a second too long, I couldn't shake the feeling that the line hadn't just been noise anymore. It felt like something trying to exist at the edge of hearing. Something I wasn't meant to fully understand yet. In the present, by 1991, Noah had learned how to live in the space between truth and avoidance. It wasn't something he had chosen consciously at first. It had started as survival, small omissions, softened answers, silence where honesty would have been too complicated to carry. But over time, it became structured, a way of moving through his life without breaking the fragile balance he had built around Tate. Now, at 23, it was no longer just a habit. It was fatigue. Noah stood alone in Tate's room that night, the quiet pressing against the walls in a way that reminded him too much of other quiet places, older houses, older versions of himself, moments where he had pretended not to feel things he was feeling too deeply to name. His mother's absence still lived in him in a way that never fully softened. Even after a year since she had passed, it remained a kind of hollow truth he could not outgrow. There were days when he functioned around it, filled his life with school, friends, routine. Mark's presence helped in those years, steady grounding, the kind of mentor who didn't try to fix him but simply existed in the same space without asking Noah to be anything other than coherent. And then there was Tate. Tate, who had never been a simple presence in Noah's life, even when Noah tried to convince himself otherwise. Tate, who had become a gravitational force Noah kept orbiting, even when everything else in his life suggested he should have drifted away. Noah pressed his hands against the kitchen counter, staring down at nothing in particular. He had been thinking about this for weeks longer if he was honest with himself. The realization had not arrived all at once. It had built slowly in quiet moments between conversations and pauses that lingered too long, in the way he always found himself measuring his words before speaking to Tate, even when there was nothing dangerous about what he wanted to say. That was what scared him most, not conflict, but adaptation, the way he had reshaped himself around Tate without ever fully acknowledging that he was doing it. He thought about love sometimes, though he rarely used the word in relation to his own life. It felt too large, too definitive. But whatever it was that existed between them, it had always felt like something that didn't follow the rules other relationships followed. It didn't have clarity. It didn't have boundaries that stayed in place. It didn't have a name that held still long enough to define it. What it did have was intensity, history, attachment that had started too early and never fully stopped growing. Noah leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. He had friends, people who cared about him in the ordinary sense of the word. He had Mark, whose guidance had helped him understand parts of himself that otherwise felt unstructured. He had people who laughed with him, checked on him, and included him. But none of them occupied the space Tate did. That was the problem. No one had ever loved Noah the way Noah loved Tate, and Noah wasn't even sure anymore if Tate knew what that meant, or if Noah himself did. He closed his eyes briefly. There was a memory that kept resurfacing lately, uninvited, persistent. Moments where Tate would look at him with a kind of focus that felt like belonging, followed by moments where that same focus would disappear entirely, replaced by distance Noah could never predict. It was that inconsistency that wore him down, not cruelty, not even anger, but unpredictability. Because Noah had spent years learning how to anticipate emotional weather in everyone else's life. He could read rooms, adjust his tone, soften edges before they became cuts, but with Tate there was no pattern stable enough to rely on, and Noah was tired. Tired in a way that wasn't just physical, it was moral, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something unsaid for too long. He had been lying to Tate in ways that no longer felt small. Not outright lies, not always, but omissions, softened truths, redirected conversations, and things left unspoken because speaking them would have required consequences neither of them seemed prepared to face. And worse than that, Noah was starting to feel the weight of what those omissions had built. A version of their relationship that existed only because Noah had carefully avoided collapsing it under honesty. He opened his eyes again. The home they lived in was still. He thought about the last time Tate had looked at him like he understood him completely, and how quickly that certainty always seemed to dissolve afterward. Noah pressed a hand to his forehead. He didn't want to hurt Tate. That was the part that made everything complicated, because underneath everything, the confusion, the imbalance, the emotional exhaustion, there was still care, deep care, the kind that didn't disappear even when it stopped being sustainable. But care wasn't enough to maintain something that was slowly eroding him. He had tried to imagine telling Tate the truth in full, not fragments, not softened versions, not carefully constructed explanations, the actual truth, and every time he tried, the same outcome formed in his mind. Silence, rupture, denial, anger, or something worse. Tate simply not understanding in the way Noah needed him to. Because part of Noah suspected that Tate had never been forced to hold emotional ambiguity in the same way he had. Tate seemed to move through certainty more easily. Through decisions, through statements, through actions that either existed or didn't. Noah lived in the in-between, and the in-between was breaking him. He thought about leaving, not as punishment, not as a reaction, but as a structure. A way to stop the slow unraveling before it reached a point where neither of them could recognize what they had become. The idea scared him, not because of distance, but because of permanence, because leaving meant removing the only constant emotional gravity he had ever known, even if that gravity had started to feel like pressure. He sat down finally, lowering himself into the chair at the table, letting his hands rest loosely in front of him. There was no dramatic moment of realization. No sudden clarity, just accumulation, years of it. He thought about Tate's family, the way they had molded him into their world without hesitation, the way that belonging had always felt partial, like something offered but never fully claimed. He thought about Mark and the way Mark had once told him that love shouldn't feel like survival. Noah hadn't fully understood that at the time. Now he did, and it made everything more difficult because he didn't know how to separate survival from love anymore. He looked down at his hands, steady, quiet, and decided finally that he couldn't keep doing this in silence. He couldn't keep living in the space between honesty and avoidance. He couldn't keep being someone who stayed only because leaving felt too complicated to name out loud. He had to tell Tate, or he had to leave before he destroyed something neither of them would know how to rebuild. And the most painful truth of all was this: Noah didn't know which option would hurt more, only that staying like this was no longer possible. June 12, 1991. Tate. I don't even know where to start because the truth is nothing about this feels clean or simple anymore. What I saw with you and Emily and Tina wasn't just a moment I could shrug off or misunderstand. It wasn't about jealousy in the way people like to simplify things. It was something deeper than that, something that hit me in a place I didn't know was still that exposed. I saw you with her and something inside me shifted immediately. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, like a door closing that I didn't realize was even open. And after that I couldn't go back to how I was with you. I tried, but I felt it every time I looked at you. The difference in distance. The way I started noticing things I used to ignore. The way I started protecting parts of myself I used to give to you without thinking. I didn't plan it. I didn't decide one day that I was going to pull away. It just started happening on its own, like my mind was trying to keep me safe from something I didn't have language for. I built walls without meaning to. At first I thought it was temporary, something I would get over, something I would talk myself out of. But the longer I stayed, the more those walls stopped feeling like a reaction and started feeling like structure, like something I needed just to stay steady around you. And I hate admitting that, because it makes it sound like I've been dishonest with you in some intentional way. But I don't think I was lying. I think I was trying to survive my own feelings without knowing how to explain them. Being with you has always felt like the most real thing in my life and the most unstable at the same time. I don't know how those two things exist together, but they do. After what I saw, I started questioning everything I thought I understood about where I stand with you. About what I am to you. About what I let myself believe without asking questions I was too afraid to hear the answers to. So I started stepping back, not to punish you, not to hurt you. Just to stop myself from disappearing further into something I can't fully define anymore. I don't know if you noticed. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but I did it because I had to. Because if I didn't build those walls, I think I would have lost the ability to tell where I end and where you begin. And I'm not sure I can afford that anymore. No way. Noah tore it up and tried writing another letter that didn't mention his feelings of jealousy or love for Tate. Tate. I tried writing this a few different ways, but there isn't a softer version of what I need to say that would still be honest. I wanted to leave you on my 18th birthday. I had already made the decision in my head, already started preparing myself for it, but you wouldn't let me, or maybe I let myself be stopped. Either way, I stayed longer than I meant to, and I think I've been trying to correct that ever since, like I've been living in a delay I never agreed to. So I'm doing it now. I'm getting my own apartment. I'm not staying in the same space where everything keeps looping back into us, where I lose track of where I end and where your life begins. I need something that belongs only to me, where I can breathe without constantly measuring what it means for you. For now, I'm crashing with Mark. He's helping me get on my feet. It's temporary, but it's the first step that actually feels like mine, and I need that more than anything right now. I need to say this clearly because I don't want it softened or misunderstood. I'm unhappy and I have unmet needs in this relationship. It's not your fault and I don't blame you. Staying with you is hurting me in ways I can't ignore anymore, not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet accumulation of everything I don't say out loud just to keep things from breaking. You'll be happier without me in your life, and I'm positive I'll be happier without you in mine. That's not anger or punishment. It's just what I believe is true now, even if it took me a long time to admit it to myself. I know this will probably feel sudden when you read it, even though it hasn't been sudden for me. I've been carrying this decision for a long time, trying to find a way to say it without getting pulled back into something I can't stay in, something I keep mistaking for stability when it's really just familiarity. I can't do that anymore. I need distance that is real, not something we step in and out of depending on how things feel in the moment. I'm not asking you to agree with it, and I'm not asking you to understand it right away. I'm just telling you because you deserve the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it changes everything between us. There are things I should have said sooner, ways I should have been clearer, but part of me kept hoping things would settle into something easier without me having to make it final. But they didn't, and I can't keep waiting for a version of us that never fully arrives. I need to choose something that is only mine now, something that doesn't depend on the emotional weight of holding us together. I'm moving beyond this, beyond what we've been, even if that sounds cruel. It isn't meant to be, it's just the truth of where I am. I haven't wanted to sleep next to you in 5 years, especially after I became an adult. I stayed anyway, and that was wrong of me. I was done after Tina at Brown, but you gave up Princeton for me and I couldn't leave after that. I couldn't carry what it would have meant to walk away when you made that choice for us, even if part of me already knew I should have. That's on me, not you. But it's the truth, I have needs you can't meet and it's my fault for staying. I need you to let me go. I lied to you for years. I told Mark everything and he advised me to leave you. You're not a bad guy, Tate, but I can't be around you like this anymore. I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't sound cruel, but I need you to understand it anyway. I don't want you to touch me anymore. I haven't wanted it for a long time, but I didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything between us, so I kept pretending I was okay. I've been faking it for years just to keep things from falling apart, and I can't keep doing that. Mark loves me, and I guess you were right, but I need. Noah's phone rang again before he could finish collecting his thoughts by writing a goodbye letter for Tate. Talia's name flashed across the screen, sharp and insistent, pulling him out of the room like a hook catching at his attention. He hesitated only a second before answering. Hey, I'm sorry, I need you downstairs, Talia said, brisk and focused. Now, it's the water issue, we can't leave it until later. Okay, yes, Noah replied quickly, already moving. I'm coming. His eyes flicked once toward the desk where the letter sat, unfinished, open, heavy in a way he didn't have time to name. Tate returned from his annual board meeting but was surprised Noah wasn't in the living room, so he checked his room upstairs. Empty. The kitchen light was on, but no Noah. He saw a piece of paper on the fridge. He thought Talia had left a message about dinner or she was out for a few hours. Tate didn't move at first. Tate picked it up without thinking, already halfway turned toward the sink. Then he saw Noah's handwriting, not a grocery list, not Talia's looping script. His fingers tightened on the edge of the page, the paper giving a faint, dry crackle. Noah, he called louder this time. The house answered back with nothing, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the wall clock. He read the first line and stopped. Something in his chest shifted, sharp, unfamiliar, not anger, not yet. Something heavier, like the floor had tilted a few degrees without warning. Noah, he tried again, moving now kitchen to hallway to the foot of the stairs. Tate took 2 steps at a time up. Bedroom doors open, empty, the bathroom light flicked on no one, back down again, faster this time. The letter was still in his hand, crumpled now at the corner where his grip had gone rigid. The front door closed but not latched. Tate stood there for a second, staring at the thin sliver of space between the door and the frame. The night air slipped through it, cool and quiet, brushing against his face. He looked back at the letter. This time he forced himself to keep reading. He just stood in the kitchen doorway, holding the letter like it had weight beyond paper, as it had physically changed the air around him. His thumb pressed into one edge hard enough to crease it again, but he still didn't open it right away. His eyes stayed on Noah first, as if looking at him directly would explain whatever he was about to read. Noah walked in, already tense, still, careful in that way he got when something was about to tip but hadn't fallen yet. Tate finally unfolded the letter. The sound of paper breaking its own folds was too loud in the quiet room. He read the line that caught his gaze. I'm getting my own apartment, I'm crashing with Mark. Something in his expression shifted immediately, but it wasn't anger yet. It was a calculation. Fast, instinctive, like his mind latched onto the only detail that mattered and started building everything around it. Mark, he read on. I'm unhappy and I have unmet needs in this relationship. It's not your fault and I don't blame you. His grip tightened slightly, the paper bent more under his fingers, but he didn't stop reading. His eyes kept moving, faster now, like slowing down would make it worse. You'll be happier without me in your life, and I'm positive I'll be happier without you in mine. That was where he stopped. Not because he couldn't read further, but because everything after that line stopped mattering in the same way. The story had already formed. Tate lowered the letter slightly, but his eyes didn't leave it. His voice, when it came, was quiet, too quiet. The basement door opened as Noah returned from the cellar. Noah was drenched. He stood in the doorway, soaked from head to toe, his hair dripping and his clothes heavy with water. "Don't go downstairs for a while," Noah said. Tate looked at him with confusion. "What happened?" "Talia discovered a pipe leak," Noah explained. "I've been helping turn off the water and secure the downstairs until the plumber gets here. They said it should be about an hour." Tate stared at him for a moment. Despite everything that had happened that morning, Noah had still jumped in to help. That was who Noah was. He could be hurt, he could be confused, he could feel pushed aside. But when someone needed help, he showed up. Tate looked at Noah standing there, soaked and exhausted, and for a moment the argument with Joey and the tension between them faded into the background. Noah had always been there. And maybe that was something Tate had taken for granted. "You're leaving me for Mark." Noah noticed the letter he had written in Tate's right hand. Noah shook his head immediately. "No, that's not what Tate, listen to me." But Tate didn't react to the correction, he didn't even acknowledge it as something worth processing. His mind was already somewhere else. "Mark." The word kept repeating itself internally, growing sharper each time, not just a name anymore but a shape, a presence, a direction. Tate lifted the letter again. "You're moving in with Mark," Tate said slowly, like he was testing how real each piece sounded when spoken out loud. "And you're staying with him." "No," Noah said quickly, "it's temporary, it's not like that." But Tate took a step forward anyway, then another half step, not rushed, not chaotic, controlled, but something in his control was tightening too hard, like it was barely holding shape. "You don't just crash with someone like that," Tate said, voice sharpening now. "Not when you're writing this." He lifted the letter slightly. "Not when you're saying you're happier without me." "That's not what it means," Noah insisted, his voice rising now, frustration breaking through his careful tone. "You're making it mean something it doesn't." Tate let out a short, humorless breath. "Am I?" he asked. And now there was something darker under it, not just jealousy anymore, something possessive, something sharp-edged, something that didn't want to interpret the situation, it wanted to own the interpretation. He looked back down at the letter again, then up at Noah like he was seeing him differently than he had 5 minutes ago. "You've been pulling away for months," Tate said, voice tightening. "You've been distant, quiet, gone half the time in your head, and now suddenly you've got a place and a plan and, what, him?" "No," Noah said again, more forcefully. "Tate, stop, that's not what this is." But Tate wasn't stopping. His grip on the letter tightened again, the edges bending further now, almost tearing. "Mark," he repeated louder this time, "you keep saying his name like it's nothing." "It is nothing like that," Noah shot back, stepping forward now too, trying to anchor him back to reality. "He's helping me, that's it." But that didn't land, it only made something in Tate's expression harden further. "Helping you?" Tate echoed. A short laugh came out of him, but there was no humor in it, only disbelief. "Helping you get away from me?" "No," Noah said, more desperate now. "Helping me get out of a situation I can't stay in." Tate's eyes snapped back to him instantly. "That's what this is," he said, voice low now, sharper than before. "This is you leaving with him." Noah froze slightly at the wording. "That's not." But Tate cut him off, the jealousy fully surfacing now, no longer restrained. "You think I don't see it?" Tate said. "You think I don't see how you're talking about him in this like he's the answer to something I apparently wasn't." "Tate, I am not choosing him," Noah said, voice breaking into frustration and something deeper. "I'm choosing me." But Tate shook his head immediately, too fast, too certain. "No," he said, "you don't write something like this and end up somewhere neutral. You don't say you're happier without me and then go live with someone else." His voice rose slightly now. "And you don't stay in someone's life for years like this and then suddenly leave to go stay with the one person you told me about, like he's just your friend." Noah stared at him. "Tate, you're not hearing me." But Tate stepped forward again, closer now. The distance between them tightening until it felt like there was no space left for misunderstanding. "I am hearing you," Tate said, voice low and intense. "I'm hearing exactly what you're doing." He lifted the letter again, shaking it slightly now. This, he said, this is you trying to make it sound clean, like it's about needing space or growing or whatever you want to call it, but it's not, it's him. No, Noah said immediately. But Tate's eyes didn't waver, and now the jealousy was no longer just in his voice, it was in his certainty. In the way he looked at Noah, the truth had already been exposed, like there was nothing left to explain, only something already lost. Tate's thoughts didn't slow down, they sharpened, fractured memory and emotion collapsing into something that felt, to him, completely logical in the moment. The memories of that fucking red coat came back first, not as a symbol anymore but as something almost physical in his mind. He could see it again too clearly, fabric, color, the weight of it. He remembered it as something given, something meant to mean love or permanence or whatever word had been attached to it back then when things were less guarded and more volatile. And then he remembered what he did to it, not gently, not carefully, a moment at Brown that had never fully lost its heat in his memory. The coat torn apart, not just fabric but meaning, ripped in a blur of anger and jealousy he hadn't fully understood at the time. Noah was there in the aftermath of it, in stunned silence where words should have been, and Tate was unable to separate what he felt from what he was doing. That image collided with the present so violently that it made his grip tighten again on the letter without him noticing. Then the photographs came next, not vague anymore, specific, pinned images in a dorm room or maybe a desk or somewhere. Tate had convinced himself they didn't matter until he made them matter. Paper in a toilet bowl, water-swallowing faces he didn't want to see anymore. A decision made in the same emotional clarity as rage, not logic. Tate had told himself back then that he was removing a problem. Now, standing in the kitchen 5 years later, it didn't feel like something removed. It felt like something that had never stopped existing in the background. And as he looked at Noah now, that old narrative started to overlay itself onto the present too easily. Mark wasn't just a name in a letter, he was continuity, a line that never actually broke. Tate's voice came out quieter than before but more certain in its own internal logic. "You never let him go," he said. Noah frowned immediately. "Let who go?" But Tate didn't answer directly. His eyes flicked briefly, like he was seeing something behind Noah rather than just him. "The coat," he said, "the photos, all of it." Noah's expression tightened. "Tate, that was years ago, that's not." But Tate interrupted again, not louder, just firmer. "It doesn't disappear just because time passes," he said. The letter crumpled slightly more in his hand. His mind kept filling in gaps faster than Noah could correct them. Distance, silence. The way Noah had been pulling away long before the letter, the way Mark's name appeared was like a solution instead of a coincidence, the way everything now seemed to point in a direction Tate could not step outside of. Jealousy, once it had fully settled, stopped asking for proof, it only asked for confirmation. "You're still attached to him," Tate said finally, voice low. "You always were." Noah stared at him, stunned now, like he couldn't tell whether Tate was talking about the same reality he was standing in. "That's not true," Noah said, but it came out slower now, measured, like he was trying not to break something further. "You're mixing things up." But Tate didn't move, didn't soften, because in his mind the story had already formed its shape, and anything Noah said now just sounded like something inside that story trying to deny its own ending. Tate's mind kept spiraling, tightening around the same idea until everything else in the room started to feel secondary. Noah didn't want to be here anymore. That thought didn't arrive as a question for Tate, it arrived as a conclusion he couldn't step away from once it formed. The letter was still in his hand, crumpled now, edges softened from how tightly he had been holding it, but his attention wasn't on the paper anymore. It was on Noah. The distance he suddenly felt in him, the way Noah stood there, was like someone already halfway out of the room even while still physically present. And from there, Tate's mind filled in the rest. Mark became the explanation. Mark became the destination. In Tate's perception, Mark wasn't incidental anymore. He wasn't just someone Noah was staying with temporarily. He became someone who understood him in a way Tate convinced himself he no longer could. Someone who had been there in the background of years, not loudly, not visibly, but persistently enough that now it felt intentional in hindsight. 5 years. That number kept resurfacing in Tate's thoughts, reshaping itself into something heavier every time he touched it. Noah spent 5 years waiting. 5 years of distance building. 5 years of Noah staying in a space that Tate now couldn't separate from himself. And in that warped internal logic, Mark stopped being a new factor and started becoming something that had been positioned there long ago. Patient, present in the margins. waiting for the moment he would finally step away, abandoning Tate for someone else, and Tate would sleep in a cold, lonely bed without his truck keeping him warm where the blonde, his Noe, belonged. Tate's jealousy sharpened again, not outwardly explosive but inwardly consuming. It changed the way he looked at everything Noah had said in the letter, reframing even neutral words into signs of replacement rather than separation. Mark loved Noah, Tate thought, not as something he knew, but as something his mind constructed to make sense of the shift he felt happening in real time. And in that same spiral, even objects began to feel implicated. The life around Noah, the spaces he moved through, the places he slept, none of it felt neutral anymore. In Tate's mind, everything started to feel influenced, shaped, redirected towards someone else. Even things as small as where Noah rested at night stopped being simple. They became contested, rewritten in Tate's thoughts as something no longer exclusively shared. His grip tightened again on the letter, crumpling it further, because if Mark was the reason, then everything else had to reorganize around that. And Tate, standing there in the kitchen, felt the shape of his world shift, not because anything had physically changed in the room, but because in his mind, something irreversible was beginning to settle into place. Tate stood in the middle of the kitchen, the crumpled letter clenched in his fist like it was the only solid thing left in the room. His breathing had changed, shallower, faster, not out of exhaustion but pressure. His chest rose and fell in uneven pulls, each inhale sharper than the last, like his body was trying to keep up with something inside him that was moving too quickly to control. Noah was near the doorway now, half-turned. Already positioned, distance was becoming the only thing that mattered. Tate noticed everything at once in fragments: Noah's stance, the angle of his body, the way his hand hovered near the frame instead of staying fully in the room. Those small details didn't feel small to him anymore. They felt like evidence stacking up in real time. His grip tightened again. The paper in his fist gave a faint, exhausted crackle. Tate's jaw clenched. His chest rose harder this time, breath catching slightly before releasing through his nose in a tense exhale. His control wasn't gone, but it was strained now, like something underneath it was pushing constantly against the surface. "Noah," he said again. This time, his voice wasn't calm. It wasn't loud either. It was rougher, pulled tight through his breathing, forced out between tension in his ribs. Noah didn't move closer. That was what made it worse. The stillness, the readiness in him. Tate's eyes stayed locked on him, but his focus kept breaking in and out, splitting between what he saw and what his mind was insisting it meant. Mark, the letter, the apartment, the distance, everything folding into a single shape he couldn't stop reconstructing. His chest heaved again, more noticeably now, a sharper inhale, a slower, controlled exhale that didn't fully settle him. "You're actually doing this," Tate said under his breath, like he was talking to himself more than Noah now. Noah's expression tightened. "Tate, stop, just listen to me." But Tate shook his head once. Small, rigid, not denial of words but denial of the situation as Noah was trying to define it. His grip on the letter loosened slightly, then tightened again, like his hand couldn't decide what to do with it. His breathing stayed uneven, still controlled enough not to spill over completely, but close, too close, and in the space between them the air felt charged with everything neither of them could fully take back now. Tate stood in the middle of the kitchen for a second longer, breathing hard, the crumpled letter still locked in his fist. His chest rose and fell in uneven pulls, each inhale sharper than the last, like something inside him had finally pushed past whatever control he'd been holding onto. Noah was by the doorway now, half-turned, ready in a way that made it worse, like he was already gone even though he was still standing there. That was what snapped something in Tate, not a sound, not a word, just that distance. "You're leaving," Tate said again, but this time it wasn't a question or a realization. It was an accusation, raw and fractured. "Tate," Noah started, but he didn't get to finish. Tate moved forward abruptly, the crumpled letter dropping from his hand onto the counter as his composure broke fully. His voice rose sharply, all restraint finally gone. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "Don't stand there and tell me it's nothing when you've already decided everything without me." Noah flinched back a step, eyes widening. "I haven't decided anything like that." But Tate wasn't listening anymore. The jealousy, the fear, the distorted certainty from everything he'd read and imagined, all of it collided at once. "You think I don't see it?" Tate said, voice shaking now. "You think I don't see you pulling away, planning, moving, and going to him?" "That's not what this is." Noah raised his voice now too, but Tate cut right through it. "Then what is it?" Tate shouted. The sound filled the kitchen. Silence followed it immediately after, heavy and unstable. Tate's breathing was ragged now, chest still heaving, eyes locked on Noah as the space between them had turned into something unbearable. And for the first time, neither of them moved. The front door of the blue house loomed like a traitor in the dim hallway light, its brass knob glinting mockingly as Noah's fingers clamped around it. His blonde hair, tousled from the evening's tension, fell into his eyes, but he shoved it back with his free hand, heart pounding against his ribs. Tate's jealousy had simmered, bubbling over letters and glares whenever Mark's name came up. Mark wasn't a casual friend, he loved Noah, but Tate's possessiveness twisted it into betrayal. Noah twisted the knob, the click echoing like a gunshot, desperate to escape the suffocating air thick with unspoken accusations. Noah had never seen Tate this intensely jealous in all 19 years of their relationship. That was what confused him. He understood Tate being protective, he understood Tate getting frustrated or shutting down when he felt hurt. But this level of jealousy, this was something Noah had never experienced from him before. Because, as far as Noah knew, there were only a few times when he had ever slept in Mark's bed. There was the night of the Tina incident. There was a morning when Tate had reached for him while half asleep. And there was the night of their Brown graduation celebration, when they had all been partying and ended up staying in Mark's hotel room. 3 nights. That was it. Out of 19 years, only 3 nights. Noah couldn't understand why Tate carried so much hurt over it, especially when Noah had never viewed those moments as a replacement for Tate. To Noah, there had never been anyone else who occupied the same place in his life as Tate did. But somehow Tate saw things differently. And that was the part Noah was beginning to realize he had never fully understood. Then Noah remembered the 28 days on the cruise ship. The time he had left with Mark for a gay cruise vacation. The note he had left for Tate. He had disappeared for nearly a month, leaving behind questions that were never fully answered. When Noah finally returned, he had come home carrying the weight of devastating news about his mother's death. And even then, even after everything, Tate had never been this jealous. That was what confused Noah the most. If Tate had been hurt by the cruise, by the note, by the time apart, then why hadn't he reacted like this before? What was it about Mark? What was it about that particular person that made Tate lose his usual ability to stay calm and rational? Noah searched his memories, trying to understand. Because this wasn't just anger. It wasn't just an annoyance. It was something deeper. Something Tate had been carrying for years. And Noah was beginning to realize he might never have truly understood how much Mark represented to him. Tate lunged from the couch, a blur of muscle and fury, his large frame closing the distance in 2 strides. "No, wait," he barked, voice cracking with raw need, but Noah shoved the door open an inch, cool night air rushing in like a promise of freedom. Tate's hand shot out, wrapping around Noah's bicep, yanking him backward with brutal force. Noah stumbled, heel catching on the rug, and slammed against Tate's chest. Thud, his shirt collar stretching taut as Tate's grip tightened like a vice. "You think you can just walk out?" Tate snarled, breath hot against Noah's ear, pulling harder. The door swung shut with a bang, the knob slipping from Noah's fingers. Noah twisted violently, elbow jabbing into Tate's ribs, crack drawing a grunt, but Tate didn't let go. He hauled Noah back fully, their boots scuffing the hardwood floor in a chaotic skid. Noah kicked out, heel connecting with Tate's shin, thwack, pain shooting up his leg, but Tate absorbed it, fueled by the fire in his gut. His Noah, his everything, daring to leave, over some prick like Mark, never. Noah spun, fists flying, pounding Tate's shoulders and chest, thump thump thump, nails scraping skin where Tate's shirt gaped open. "Let go, you psycho!" Noah yelled, voice echoing off the walls, blonde strands whipping as he ducked and weaved. Tate roared, tackling him sideways, both crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs, boom, the impact jarring Noah's teeth. They rolled, Tate's weight pinning Noah briefly before Noah bucked his hips, knee driving into Tate's thigh, smack forcing him off. Noah scrambled up, lunging for the door again, fingers grazing the knob, but Tate's arm hooked around his waist, dragging him back down with a savage yank. The struggle intensified, minutes stretching into an eternity of grunts and scuffles. Noah clawed at Tate's clothed forearms, leaving snags in the fabric while Tate's hands fisted in Noah's shirt front. "Rip!" Fabric tearing at the seams of my shirt with a sharp shrip, buttons popping free and pinging across the floor like scattered pearls. Noah thrashed, legs kicking wildly, one foot slamming into the coffee table crash, sending a lamp teetering but not falling. Tate pressed down, knees bracketing Noah's hips, but Noah bridged his back, flipping them over, thud, Tate's head bouncing off the rug. "Get off me, stalker," Noah gasped, shoving at Tate's face, palms smacking his cheeks, slap stinging both. Tate's eyes blazed with manic possession, jealousy coiling like a serpent in his chest. "Mark, that smug bastard," laughing too close, touching Noah's arm. Tate surged up, grabbing Noah's wrist, twisting it behind his back as he hauled him toward the bedroom. Noah resisted every inch, planting his feet, body arching against the pull, drag, nails digging into Tate's clothed cuffs for purchase. "You're not going anywhere," Tate hissed through clenched teeth, voice low and venomous, yanking harder. Noah's shirt sleeve caught on the doorframe, rip, fabric splitting from shoulder to elbow, exposing pale skin marked with fresh bruises from Tate's grip. "I decide when this is over, not you." They hit the bedroom threshold in a frenzy, Noah twisting free for a split second, darting toward the window, but Tate barreled after, shoulder-checking him into the wall, thump, plaster dust sifting down. Noah reeled, swinging a wild punch that grazed Tate's jaw crack, but Tate caught his other arm, slamming him onto the bed, wump mattress compressing under their combined weight. Noah bounced up, knees drawn, shoving Tate's chest with both hands, push, but Tate was a wall of unyielding muscle, climbing on top, pinning Noah's shoulders down. The fight dragged on, sweat soaking through what's left of Noah's torn shirt, clinging transparently to his torso. Noah bucked and writhed, hips snapping up to dislodge Tate, thrust, elbows jabbing ribs, knees battering thighs. Tate grunted with each hit but held fast, one hand clamping Noah's jaw, forcing eye contact. "You'll never leave me," Tate growled, breath ragged, free hand ripping at the remaining sleeve, shrip, cloth shredding completely, leaving Noah's arms bare and exposed. Tate's certainty wasn't really about control, it was fear, raw and unfiltered. The idea of Noah leaving didn't just unsettle him, it hollowed something out inside him. In his mind, the bed wasn't just a place to sleep, it was the only space where the noise in his chest quieted, where the dark didn't feel so endless. Without Noah, that same bed would stretch too wide, too cold, every shadow sharper, every silence louder. He told himself it would be catastrophic, unthinkable, but beneath that was a quieter truth he couldn't admit. He didn't know how to exist without Noah softening the edges of everything. Tate's fear of being alone outweighed anything else, even Noah's right to choose. The thought of being left behind twisted into something desperate and dangerous in his mind until he convinced himself he had to stop it at any cost. To him, it wasn't about control, it was about survival, but that didn't make it any less suffocating. If it came down to it, he believed he'd use whatever strength he had to keep Noah from walking away.